Yeah.
I don't think I can fix this, guys.
But it's not the end of the world.
What, racism in Britain? No, probably not in one podcast.
Why is there so much life?
Mine just make racists afraid again.
Welcome to Beyond Binary, making thinking great again. Because the world is filled with a bounty of beautifully broad ideas. So you should never be forced to listen to the charlatans that try and force you to pick a side. From Cordoba, I'm Finn.
From Plymouth, I'm Chris.
From Amsterdam, I'm Marijn.
And from London, I'm Jamie.
So what other topic could we discuss today other than Black Lives Matter, the movement, why it triggers so many gammon flakes, how it's built such an impossible to ignore momentum, and why and how it's resonating so strongly outside of the US. So let's see what nuance we can explore beyond the typical partisan talking points and the reactionary 24 news hour cycles we keep hearing. We are very excited to be joined today by our guest, Jamie. I was fortunate enough to bump into him at WOMAD Music Festival a couple of years ago. He was wearing a gold jacket and a wonderful riding helmet. Jamie, how are you doing? Would you like to introduce yourself better than I just did?
That was perfectly sufficient regards to my wardrobe. Definitely. But, I mean, if you want about me, then I suppose the accent might drive a certain sort of geolocation. But my father is Scottish and my mother is Guyanese and South African. And I grew up in Falkirk in between Edinburgh and Glasgow in the 80s and 90s, and it was pretty hairy at points. And then went and did 2 years in Yorkshire in Barnsley, which was frying pan fire sort of scenario. That was quite educating. And then I found Brighton, and that was obviously radically different. And I've been in London for about 15 years.
So I thought we'd just kind of go round, talk about, Finn, Marijn, what was your first impression of the Black Lives Matter movement? When did you first hear about it? And let's start there, shall we?
3 or 4 years ago, when the first kind of wave of, I want to say publicity, but like awareness, like where it became more in the mainstream, right? And I heard about it then, and then immediately I heard people saying like, but all lives matter. And I was like, what?
Isn't it a shame? So, the first time you heard it, you also heard.
Yeah, and it's still, it baffles me that people are still, sort of trying to, I don't know how it even is an argument against it, but they're still saying silly things like that don't really make any sense.
Well, so it's very similar for me. Like I had, again, immediately upon hearing it, heard a bunch of the people against it. And I've been sharing videos of police brutality in America for years. Like it always looks very concerning to me. I studied group psychology, and a lot of it was about racism and these issues. But unfortunately, my first impression of the Black Lives Movement came from these sort of like alt-right thinkers like Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, saying about what's wrong with it. And, of course, racism's bad, but this group is bad too, and it's not the solution. And playing the race card is the part of the problem, and let's not do identity politics. So it was really interesting for me going through that. I've told you this YouTube rabbit hole that I went down about all of that. That for ages I've heard like, oh no, like yeah, sure, we're not racist, but like here's a problem with some of the things they're saying, and all lives matter, surely. And I'm like, and at first pass, I think, I was trying to, as I always do, play devil's advocate and hear both sides out. And when you end up in the middle, you end up in a strange place. And funnily enough, the biggest impression for me from the movement was, do you remember that one of the Kardashians, Kylie Jenner, she did a Pepsi commercial?
Oh, yes, I saw that.
Now, they filmed that out in Thailand, and a bunch of my friends are actors and extras in that commercial. And so they were all really upset. They didn't get their big payday because, this big American company's kicking up a fuss.
What was the one where she ostensibly stopped? Sort of she's stopped a riot with a
first impression of it. And the funny thing is, then, they've made themselves an impossible to ignore movement. And then the more you read about it, the more you're like, I don't really buy many of the arguments against them these days. But we'll get into that today. That's the purpose of the topic. Marijn, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, so where you came at it from maybe the right YouTube avenue, I came at it very much from the left-wing message board side. I'm on some American progressive message boards. So Black Lives Matter featured there very early on. A lot of topics about police brutality. And it's a sad thing that we have to say it, right? But it's the reality that we're living in. For me, a lot of post-colonialism that we're seeing still worldwide. So it's been a topic that, from even my studies of cultural anthropology, has been part of my the visibility. I've had visibility to it, but then of course in my private life, much less so here in the Netherlands. I think police brutality is still also an element here, but definitely not in the way it is in the States.
So, Jamie, when you first heard of it, did you think of it as an American movement, or is it something you've always been?
Yeah, I think, and it's like sort of, I forgot about that advert until you mentioned it, and I do think that anybody in the UK who's been going through their own experiences might have regarded it as a sort of a faraway thing when it began 4 years ago, and obviously now everything is dovetailed in. I think that there is a sort of like mission creep of social media that is kind of imperceptible from day to day, but I think there might be a lot more people connected in a lot more myriad ways like now than perhaps were 4 years ago. So it might have like sort of snowballed a lot more rapidly and quite coherently. And like the Bristol statue takedown of the Colston plinth has been echoed around the world within like sort of 72 hours of it happening. And that, I don't know whether or not that would have occurred. I think COVID, it's a collection of different things, isn't it? Like, so the fact that everybody is like sort of obsessively paying attention to a lot of different strands at the moment means that the reactions are already almost primed with certain people who are frustrated, having to tolerate the company of whomever they happen to have locked themselves in with, and are watching politicians make promises that they either didn't intend or can't keep anyway. And I think there's like there's a constant pressure cooker sort of reactionary default with a lot of people just now, where they're like, the last thing that I want to be doing is this shit and that shit. So I think there's like a lot more people are prepared to. I think a lot more people are just like sort of activated and rightly buoyed by the prospect of momentum happening. And this one just doesn't seem like it's going to stop, because previously I think
it is a big shift. You sense when it's a minority pressure group to now, like, you even see Republicans like Newt Gingrich coming out and being like, we've made mistakes, we've legalized drugs, we've done all sorts wrong, and you're like, Jesus Christ, if you're on the wrong side of history compared to Newt Gingrich, you're probably in a bad place. And it does, no, you're right, it feels like a proper momentum.
It is, there's something definitely like worth capitalizing on. I just tested my setup with my girlfriend in Bristol, who was at the Colston demo recently, and she says that yesterday, simultaneous with the stuff that was fairly well publicised in London, which was abhorrent, quite a lot of it, they similarly minded folks in Bristol have careered around and basically sort of trashed whatever BLM messaging has been left around different monuments in town, saying that they're protecting their history and such. But my girlfriend and her mates are basically in the process of making up more placards, sewing lots of different bits and bobs. They've done an open Facebook group which is just saying, come down here and Antifa, right? Yeah.
Jamie, a question for you.
Yes.
If like Black Lives Matter is an anti-racist movement, someone who's anti-racist, like, is that not just the racist? Like,
because I think I've caught Chris's eye the other day because I was having a massive set to with a guy from work on Facebook, and it was quite draining. But and you're all going to be well aware of these circular arguments that are absolutely rooted in whataboutism and just and a reluctance to. I tell you what, before we started, I just popped onto his Facebook just to see if he'd written anything in updates to what's just happened yesterday, because I guess there's going to be a lot of people desperately scrabbling to try and contextualize what happened yesterday as being misrepresented by the media, that it was just there was like several thousand well-meaning and peaceable protesters with only a couple of bad apples.
They can't have it both ways.
No, they can't.
They can't be like,
Churchill,
the media misrepresents things, right? And words don't matter, snowflakes, and then be like, so there's just a deafening silence in certain quarters on my social feeds, which I'm finding quite enjoyable. What I'd like actually is to see an aerial shot of all of these things, because I think we're all of a mind that this particular voice, this channel and narrative has been buoyed and inflated and like increased in volume by the media, and is not necessarily as stark or as bad as you might be led to think it is. I genuinely reckon that there was like a couple of thousand of Neds wandering around Trafalgar yesterday, whereas there was tens of thousands of BLM protesters. And the thing in Berlin the other day, I don't know if you saw the pictures of that, it was enormous, like absolutely enormous. But I did pop onto his Facebook just to have a little look today, and what was really funny is that he's not posted anything for a few days, but the last thing he has posted, which was about 3 days ago, is a topiaried hedge of an elephant. So I just thought it was absolutely perfect. Like we don't need to talk about the elephant outside the room. To him, so.
Okay. There's no meaning to it. It's just a funny.
Yeah. Because he's got nothing else to say at this point, and he'd rather put up, because I'm kind
the elephant in the room.
Yeah. I've just like been like sort of on it every day, really, because I can't help it. But that's the way that the algorithm feeds into whatever your current thing that you're chasing is, and I'm getting pinged. I'm lucky enough that like sort of people tend to throw stuff my way. I don't really have to look that hard, so I can get people like sort of, if they know that you're mindful of it, or of a kin about things, and you get dropped into people's furrows, and it makes it easier to stay in touch, I suppose. But I don't want to delete anybody, because I still want to have the conversations, and I'm very aware of everybody's echo chambers as they are so starkly defined these days on social media. But it is infuriating, because if you're saying that you don't think that the BLM stance, because essentially what they're doing is they're trying to nitpick about violence as the underpinning of like why this is an invalid.
We support the movement, and of course racism is bad.
Yeah,
but why can't you protest peacefully, like that nice Colin Kaepernick fella who we all supported?
That's right. Yeah. Totally got his back and didn't fire him at all. It was
that's the thing that you need to change. The
world. And that's part and parcel of the whole thing, isn't it? Because it's like
it's amazing to me the people that are suddenly concerned that a target in some city in America they've never been to is on fire. They're like, and you're like, so when has this become the priority? When were you concerned with targets? Like profit margin this quarter? What are we talking about? Why is this?
I mean, it's been devastated, but apparently, up until that point, if you listen to Priti Patel, shoplifting was down. So, which I thought was one of the best things.
Not to mention that it is a completely peaceful protest, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, except for maybe a few instances that have nothing completely to do with the protest.
We're talking about protest, right? Looters loot.
And we're talking about a protest.
Some people intentionally merge those two, and you're like,
Yeah, we're talking about a protest that is against a monopoly on violence, because the police there has a monopoly on violence. They're abusing that monopoly on violence. They're protesting against it, but they have no resources to do this violently at all. Right? The moment they do anything violently, it will escalate. And there's only one side that has the abuse of power and resources at the moment. Right? Protesters will be gunned down like it would maybe in certain other kind of countries, which is not happening. And the only reason it's not is because it is a peaceful protest, right?
Yeah, you're right. Otherwise, I suppose it would just be a weighed-in sort of military scenario, which it looks like is hopefully in America at least being fairly well guarded by the military dons at the moment, who seem to be quite reluctant. And I think they're trying to realign themselves, aren't they? Because that man made the apology for being even in the photo op with Trump regards the tear gassing. He's written a formal apology to say that he shouldn't have been there.
Incredible, right? Like Trump's come out and said military are going to come in. The military have been like,
don't know if we are, mate.
Maybe not.
Trump's bluff's definitely called here, yeah. And the protesters are winning, right? Especially in the States. They're getting a lot more done than anyone ever thought they would be able to.
There's loads of stuff happening, isn't there? Like they're sacking an entire police force. I mean, I assume what they're going to do there is like everybody will reapply for their job. But there will be some sort of.
But for decades, right? We've just expected the police to get away with murder. The guy that kicked this off, right? If you knelt on someone's neck while being filmed with 5 police officers' hands in pockets for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, because we all know, right? Like we all know that they get away with it. Not only they don't get criminal charges,
right?
They don't even like they get paid. Like they still get paid. They don't even get put on probation.
Yeah, some of the records in California are absolutely spine tingling. There's that chap Willie, somebody, a rapper, who was like shot by 6 cops 55 times whilst he slept in his car. There's another cop who's knowingly shot 3 people, killed all of them, and was promoted recently in California. They sound like they've got a serious problem. But I don't know if you could like sort of necessarily cherry pick which one's worse. The whole length and breadth of the United States seems to have had this thing going on for a while. And one of the things I've read about, which may be like one of the reasons, the keystones of all of this stuff going wrong and becoming more and more military-like, is that Palantir AI thing that they've been using to roll out police engagement protocols. And it's owned by Peter Thiel, the billionaire, and he's a Trump ally. And they've programmed this thing with loads of different problem-solving algorithms, but it also was key to the way that they approached Iraq and Afghanistan. So they're rolling out essentially war protocol engagement stuff, and to all the police forces.
RoboCop, right?
More or less. It also runs Wall Street. It's a fascinating
thing. That's happened for years as well. A lot of the police are former army vets, right? Like, because they've got the military training.
Yeah.
And so they're there. They sometimes have PTSD.
Yeah, sure,
right?
Sure.
And they've been trained to go into war zones.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the mentality you can tell from how some of them are approaching. That combined with the fact that they then seize assets from people. Have you seen that? They can, like hold the money. The money they've seized, and then they use it. They have to. It's use it or lose it. So they have to buy like these almost tank sort of things. These huge jeeps.
Even the school police has it. Yeah, school police with an armored vehicle. Right. Very interesting concept. They have grenade launchers as well.
Just like sort of just tax write-offs. I was in Minneapolis. My ex-girlfriend moved over there, and I moved over there as well to see whether it could shake, and it didn't. It was quite an odd experience. I was there for a couple of months, but I came back, and shortly after we split up, her best mate, an Australian woman, was shot dead by a cop she called out. I think it was she suspected it was sexual assault happening in an alleyway next to her apartment. So she called the police, and when the police turned up, she came out in her dressing gown at 3 a.m. and one of the guys leant over his partner and just shot her 5 times right there. And she was Australian white, and it turned out he was Somalian. So the book was thrown at a cop for the first time because of this radical flip-flopping of the normal criteria of what occurs here, and he was one of the first people that had any sort of serious reprieve,
Yeah.
Well, pardon me, sort of a comeback, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as interesting as it is, and as much as we love to sort of throw scorn at America and how fucked up they are, Carla was the one that just eloquently pointed this out. The Brits have this habit of being like, oh, look at America, look at their problems with race. Isn't it terrible over there? And then even as we've just done, right? Oh, look at those thugs yesterday, like the EDL or whatever they're calling themselves these days, right? We love to look at very working class racism, overt racism. And we're like, that's the problem. We're all against that, aren't we? Yes. And thank God we don't have problems with racism in this country. So I thought it'd be worth getting a bit deeper into why this isn't just an American problem.
That's one
and why it isn't
objection.
just a working football hooligan problem. So stuff like this systemic racism. Right?
That's one objection I've heard about an sort of counter argument against Black Lives Matter is that Some people that I've been friends with have said, well, you know, in America, you know, there is people are dying, but in Britain, only 2 people have been shot by the police, and they were dodgy anyway. So I don't know why it's so important over here. So yeah, Jamie, what are your thoughts on that? Because it does seem like there's racism, systematic and overt, like Chris said. In the UK,
yeah, I mean,
needs to be addressed.
I can only speak from my own experience. I mean, like, sort of growing up in Falkirk in the 90s was pretty fraught. There was people who identified themselves as neo-Nazis. And they were men. And I was having to deal with them from the age of 13 or 14. And it was a long time before I got around to reading Rennie Eddo-Lodge's book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. But one of the sort of zingers in that really struck me was that she felt, as well as the sort of constant wearing down of having to repeat your stance to people, she said that she felt that she was an alien born in the country of her own birth, and that really resonated with like my own experience, where I've got this accent, but other people weren't having it. So I'd be asked, "What's your name, Jamie? What's your Paki name?" And the first got asked that when I was 8. I went back to my mum and dad and said, "What's my Paki? Have I got one? Have I been given it? Do I get it when I'm 10?
Where's my Paki name?
Yeah, come on, don't leave me hanging. I've got to go back tomorrow. The guy's going to be back there in PE in the lockers, and I've got to have my Paki name ready." And that's relatively surreal. And a lot of the stuff that happened to me was quite surreal. But then when me and my then girlfriend came back from Egypt, 9/11 had happened whilst we were away, and I remember being in a queue for Heathrow for several hours, and this guy that looked a bit like me turned around and said, "I think we're in for a long fucking night." And it was like a baton had been passed from like black to brown, and all of a sudden there was like a massive war with the sort of the soul and the visage of Arabia in general. It's like, okay, now we're going to make a boogeyman out of this lot. And because of the way that I look, it's quite, I get mixed up with it. I was asked for directions in Egypt and Morocco. The people just think that I'm from around there. And I've been held up at gunpoint in Brighton, when I used to live there, by armed police who basically stopped me whilst I was going to work at 10 a.m. So generally, like, if somebody thinks that I am white looking, I normally respond with, well, I'm definitely brown enough to have been stopped under Section 44A of the Terrorism Act and held up at gunpoint until... And that guy was really pissed off as well, because as soon as I started talking, you could see on his face, he was like, "Oh, fuck, this guy's Scottish. Shit."
Yeah. Oh my god, so much paperwork.
But I mean, we're talking about the subtleties of racism, which I guess is like a particularly British recipe, right? It's like whereas it's
this is it. Like, the British have always, like, everything the Americans do, we see them as blunt, coarse, obvious.
Yeah.
Which I think paradoxically means that our racism is more refined.
Yes, quite so. I mean, like, because the guy, like, I'll just quickly finish this off, but I tried to find the my little stop and search form, but essentially what's really interesting about it is that he wrote down Guyana, South Africa, and then Scottish. So that's a territory, Guyana, the country, South African, I think then he said nationality, and then he said Scottish at the end. So he's basically done it. If you met me, you would clearly say Scottish first and a bunch of other shit. But the way that he did it, obviously, he felt embarrassed. He realised that he's got to fill this thing out. And then so what he's done is he's kind of flipped it so it looks, at least on paper, that he had, ideas about who this person was before he approached him, and then sort of to stop him under legislation. But I just found that, because that's a very subtle thing. I hadn't even bothered looking
you're right,
at it.
But it shows also a system that was then acceptable.
Yeah,
he stopped you.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, you can't be going around you can't be going around stopping like sort of white Scottish guys. It's not 1990, because it's not back in the heyday when all British terrorists were just like angry white men with a particular brogue. And that's not lost on me either. The way, and that's quite a working class sort of a conundrum as well, isn't it? From back in the day, it was like there were rebels and there were terrorists, and there was the Grand National bombings and all this sort of stuff. And that was of a very particular time when people with all sorts of Irish accents were stigmatized because of like a bunch of like random government policy that raging against each other for decades. And then all of a sudden, really, it felt like in the blink of an eye, it was all about the Middle East. I guess like sort of the most promising aspect of, and maybe perhaps one of the reasons why all this momentum is gathering steam, is because anybody who's been othered is identifying and getting right behind the BLM thing, because it's clearly not just about that. And obviously you would be a fool and an idiot to be saying, yeah, all lives matter, excuse me. But people who are happy enough to realize that this is actually a lot bigger than the word black are all rolling into this, and that's absolutely superb. You know, like the transphobic stuff is getting addressed again. There's like people who from Eastern Europe who are going to these things because they feel exactly the same way. You know, Lincolnshire is not a great place to be if you're Polish, apparently. So there's a lot of people feel a lot of similar ways about being othered in general, not just having to identify as black. And that's
and despite what the critics say, right? That say, oh no, this isn't inclusive; it's an exclusive group. Anyone that attends and gets involved in the online discussion finds it to be very inclusive and very supportive. Sorry, Murang, you were saying that.
So I think the word "other" is very central here, because I mean racism has, for me, I think two sides to it. It's part historically, and it's also part culturally, almost ingrained to a part where culturally humans have always identified in terms of relation to other, right? So the us as a group is identified in how we are different from another group. And this can be in the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we do our things, and definitely also the way we look, right? If we go back to tribal people, you see that they have, they might use tattoos, they might use paint, they might use other things to physically identify themselves as separate from another group. And there's this very innate thing in human culture that we define ourselves as different from other. And then we had this historical pattern of colonialism, of course, where, especially the Western European eventually became the much more powerful cultural social force in the world. And I think those two combined have led us to where we are here now, and that especially the non-white European groups in the world, ranging from black to all the way to Papua New Guinea tribes, wherever, have been othered in a abusive power relationship. Yeah, and this is still what we're seeing right now, right? And this is why we're throwing over statues that come from that age when we started to, abuse.
I really think it's like sort of extremely small potatoes for people to be saying that it's inappropriate to be taking these things down on account of history. And as quite a lot of people already said, this is history; it's happening, and we're going to have to recontextualize a lot of this stuff. And whilst I was visiting some friends yesterday, their home situation actually gave me a pretty good metaphor. Which I'm always scrabbling for metaphors. Any idiom's a charm. I'll grab it with both hands. But they basically had, just prior to the lockdown, a bunch of cowboy builders in who completely fucked their house. To the point where the next guys that came in to save the day were like, okay, this is actually dangerous, that like it's nearly falling down. And essentially what they had to say was, we're going to make this better, but first it's going to get a lot worse, because it's just been built on faulty foundations. It's completely buggered. These last guys didn't know what they were doing. And that's absolutely perfect, really. That's exactly what this is, because if you want to argue about it in this sort of like, well, I don't think that violence is the answer, or I don't think that these protests are appropriate, you're happy to sit in a house that's going to eventually fall. Your top floor is going to be on your ground floor, and you're going to be crushed eventually. It's just, you can't ignore it. It needs to get sorted out. Unfortunately, it is a shit show. It was a complete mess. None of these colonials ever thought that they would fail. They never perceived anything like, women's getting the right to vote, black people not being slaves, and an interesting aside in America, quite a lot of these statues of Robert E. Lee, they didn't go up on the eve of an anniversary for commemorating anything. They went up in direct reactionary opposition to the fact that people were getting the right to vote, or that there was progressive legislation happening in some states. They went up because there was an immune system response to the fact that shit's changing.
30 years old, right?
Yeah. Some of that, and that's really bad. Like, stuff being slapped up in the last couple of decades. It's like, whoa, we don't need to be talking about like that sort of shit right now. Do you see that thing with the NASCAR thing, the driver, the NASCAR is basically
they banned, again, you're like, oh my God, how's it taken this long? But they banned Confederate flags at NASCAR rallies. And there's one driver who's, I don't know if he's ever made a lap of the track successfully in a 30-year career. I think he's 50 years old.
Oh right, is he just one of the fall guys? Because he said, I'm never.
He's on like 0-win record. Like,
is it
he's 50
right?
Years old, and he's going to retire because of it.
Yeah, and the comeback was vicious. They're like, we've just had to Google you to find out who you are. Good luck with you and your 12 followers. Bye. Don't care. And obviously there's a slight sort of showboating in all of this. Like if you see like sort of quite a lot of these companies will feel that they're going to have to make some sort of statement. Especially the NFA. like what the hell's the NFA got to say about any of this? You really have
what's the NFA?
Is that right? The National Football Association, like for the
NFL.
Oh no, NFL. Sorry, and like sort of they really have like dismissed their right to make comments.
I alluded to it earlier, right? Like they told him off for protesting peacefully because it was disrespectful. Now's not the time. Do your job. And now they're like, why can't you protest peacefully? Like, and you just realise, like, they know
which one is it?
None would have ever satisfied them.
No, you're quite right.
They always just want people to be quiet and not say the awkward thing, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's it, and just avoid the fact that the house is falling down eventually, because we're just going to pass it over to the kids, right? And then, my housemate went to the demo last week, and he said that 90% of them were 20, 22. And I was like, that's kind of good and bad. I like the fact that there's a lot of young people activated, and this sort of stuff's been happening, like, say, since the Scottish indie ref. It certainly went a way that surprised quite a lot of people, but they didn't get the result that quite a lot of people might have wanted, but at the same time they have activated so many people from the age of 14, 15, 16 onwards, all joining up and subscribing and becoming party to the conversation, which is going to be devastating for people like my man I'm arguing with on Facebook, who doesn't think that these people should be even allowed the right to vote, because that is like another, like the classic status quo has to be maintained by a lot of like slightly more conservative leaning elderly folk having the right to say what they want, to keep everything just cushy enough for me to check out when I'm 80. And I don't want to be having any sort of like shifting planes going on the way out.
Yeah, well, what about my pension, right?
Yeah, because that's
this is no problem, right? We have a lot of 20-year-olds, teenagers who are very left-wing, progressively leading, activated. We can even see this in the votes, but we don't have the older generation still. We'll see after COVID, but electorally, there's still an issue there. You see it in Brexit, and so you also have the fact that once these 20-year-olds become 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, have a job, have a family, have a mortgage, they also tend to become at least less activated.
Yeah,
right? Maybe a bit more conservative, less activated.
And that's the fallacy with okay, we appreciate that maybe that statute's wrong, but that's not how these things are done. You're like, well, it's the only way it gets done, because you don't vote for it in a sub-clause of a referendum in 20 years' time. Like, every statute that's ever been toppled has been
you need cultural force
in the town hall that they went, fuck this, right?
Yeah, you need cultural force, and that's definitely a good thing right now that we're seeing, because there is a lot of intersectional cultural force behind addressing the fact that we're living in a broken house, right? And this is in very wide socio-economical terms.
Yeah. It's impossible to ignore, and I don't think any of us have probably seen anything massively convincing from the British government regards how we're coming out of this enforced lockdown. And I work in conferences and events, and there is nothing for 2020 now. That everybody's just agreed. There's no point. I mean, I got booked for something in September. I was like, well, what do they know that I don't? Because there's no guarantee that any of that industry.
I just had an event cancelled in May next year.
In May,
when it happened, I was like, "Are you guys serious?" But to be honest,
you don't know. Yeah,
they've been right so far.
They can't risk it, I guess. Yeah.
It beggars investigation in any sort of strand, like how any of these industries are going to. I mean, I've read a couple of documents about how live music's going to go back to touring, for instance, because quite a few of my mates are roadies or performers, and but I don't. I mean, the bigger stuff that I do, like we do quite a big thing in Berlin every year. That will probably continue as and when it's safe, because that's like 1,500 people all schmoozing and making deals about renewable energy and stuff in a one venue, and it's quite useful for that. But all the small potato stuff that I do, 200 people in a room with one guy at a podium shouting at a bunch of other people about whatever. This will be, it'll just be on Zoom. I mean, you don't need to, if you want to see my slides, download my PowerPoint. We don't need to hire the venue. Commercial rent's fucked. I mean, like, quite a lot of my mates are saying they're going back to work. Like, change, right? Yeah, my mate works.
If you survive this,
yeah.
Having not paid rent for 8 months, I don't think you'll go.
That's exactly, because like quite a lot of them are going, wait a minute, so why have we got one office in Gresham Street, for instance, and a contingency in case that one gets bombed or flooded in Southwark? What's the point in us paying 2 rents in London, which is obviously artificially jacked all the prices up everywhere in the city centre anyways, because there's loads of like empty stuff owned by PwC, Barclays and all this sort of, in the event of this, when we move to B, and in the event of B going under, then we just all work from home, at which point you're like, well, why don't you fucking just work from home anyway? Or WeWork. WeWork was absolutely tanked beforehand because it turned out that they were all on all the drugs and completely bananas, and now it turns out that might actually be the only game in town. Because
so, tying back in the two strands, the two tangents, which I can do, trust me.
He's had a lot of practice with us.
You have a bunch of people who are like, oh no, but the system's bad, but you've got a job and you've got a pension, so don't flip the table, right? And we now have a bunch of unemployed people who aren't sure what the solution is and how things are going to get better. And now when you're like, okay, but now's not the time to flip the table, like, fucking why not?
Yes, it's table flipping time.
Top of the fucking statue and throw it in the fucking, why not?
There's a lot coming together, right? Because we've seen right-wing politics on the rise the last few years. We've seen Trump being elected. We've seen Bolsonaro in Brazil we've seen so many difficult, more conservative waves around the world. And indeed, as you're saying, we're in a socio-economical situation that's remarkable. We're in an environmental situation where all the alarm bells are going off. If there's ever been any time in history to flip the table, it's probably right now. Yeah.
It's table flipping time.
Exactly. Yeah.
This
and
is
I think
one.
A lot of people are resonating with that, right? And that's why you're seeing such a movement behind it.
And there will be opportunism throughout, won't there? And like some people they would not have ever got in there with the intent of derailing an entire thing, but they will, by their actions, accidentally get bad PR for all that's involved. But that's just
interesting. Like, so is it against? That officially it's against the movement. Everyone should be nice and peaceful, protesting only, right? But it's also part of the thing that's making the noise, getting the attention, making it impossible to ignore.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because I think another big aspect of all this, and another way that you could probably characterize the argument of "I don't think this is correct" is bystander psychology, isn't it? Because it's just like because there's the victim, the perpetrator, and then the bystander, and depending on how you describe a situation, the bystander is quite often worse than the perpetrator because they're just kind of going, "Well, I mean, I don't know if it's any of my business." And that essentially, right now, you'd be utterly guilty, in effect, of not really taking part and being active and having part of being supportive and being empathic and supportive of anybody who feels like they have a say in this or have a part in this, because the future is quite uncertain right now in ways that make 2016 look like hilariously cuddly. I mean, even in the last sort of few months, remember at the start of this year, Australia was on fire, and you're like, my God, well, it can't get any worse than this. And then you're like, wait a minute, what's happening in Wuhan? And then all of a sudden, it's like a full global economic collapse, which nobody. So I don't know. I've tangentially drifted. Beg pardon.
So to tie that in, one criticism I've heard of the movement is that people say, well, it's been hijacked by extreme left-wing Marxists and anarchists, and really it's a Trojan horse for Marxism, and they've come out of that. right? To me, if you send that pyramid there's a pyramid of arguments, right?
Yes.
Of refuting arguments. And at the bottom, it's literally name calling. It's like, you're an idiot. And then it's ad hominem, right? And then you've got, disagreeing. And then you've got citing evidence with your counterclaim. At the top, you have refuting the central argument with evidence. This is second from the bottom. It's like slightly better than going, well, you're an idiot. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, but I'm pretty sure all four of us have just stated in one way or another that the problem is capitalism.
I was mindful of it. As Finn was speaking, I was like, wait a minute, I've done that. Literally.
Are we being pro-capitalist? Is this movement pro-capitalist? I'm not sure it is. Well, they're not wrong in their
Marxist shouldn't be a swear word, right? This is
there's that.
Is the thing. It's being reframed this way by, let's take the example of the UK government, anyone who's a Tory supporter or voter or, they're very, very against. There's a lot of like communist phobia, capitalism is good, neoliberalism is good. Sure, anything against that is
or Antifa. It's just shortening it to Antifa, because if you say anti-fascist, everybody goes, oh no, fair enough. I mean, that's
this is amazing, right? Like people are against Antifa. I'm like, did you think that one through? Did you entirely think that one through?
I think
you're basically saying you're Nazi. Okay, thank you very much.
Both the left and the right have exaggerated the threat of Antifa, right? Like, I think a lot of it is cosplay. You see these guys.
A little bit, yeah.
And also that's how it's social media trolling. Like, you've seen how big Antifa became as a threat when they started saying we've got these super soldiers. Like, people are very easily triggered by these sorts of online spats. And I think, I don't know. Maybe it's too easy for me to say as a 7-foot-tall white dude. I'm not particularly scared of the rise of neo-Nazis or Antifa. I think, for the most part, it's a big media story where like you said, Jamie, it's mostly 10,000 peaceful people, and then all those cameras are looking for one person kicking off. And this is the rise of Antifa. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, in Spain. Can I just quickly tell you one little anecdote, and then I'll go back to you, Moraine. Like, in Spain, there's been some government protests, because here is a left-wing government, which is a coalition between PSOE, which is like Labour, and then Podemos, which is more left. It's like a left populist, more Marxist, party. And then so the right-wing people, basically the rich people, who've all got a lovely big house during the quarantine, a nice garden, do you know what I mean? Maybe a swimming pool, and they're all pissed off with the way the government's handled it. So they went out and did a demonstration, and it was just the most relaxed thing I've ever seen. It was so like non-threatening. It was like a bunch of people wrapped up in Spanish flags, banging saucepans, and I was like, oh, it's kind of cute. Do you know what I mean? I was like, is that really scary? Maybe the next phase along is, but that just seems.
And does that garner a reaction? Does this historically? I
think people just went, oh, that's nice,
right?
Yeah, the hardcore left-wing people just like, fair enough. What's your point? Like, we're unhappy with the government. Yeah, what exactly are you?
But you're lucky then in Spain, right? Because if we're saying, we're not afraid of the rise of the right. I don't know where you're living, but it really depends on where you are, right? If you're in Eastern Europe, if you're in Brazil, if you're in Russia, there's plenty of countries. And even I look at Britain and I see Brexit and I'm like, there's some rising of the fascism again.
No,
we should have learned from history better.
We've discussed this many times. But when Scotland decides to leave the UK, that's not fascism. People have a right to self-govern. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that comes around again, because that's going to make everything a lot more interesting, isn't it? I guess it's always going to be in the back foot. Yeah, me too. Well, that was one of the more annoying things about being a Scotsman in London on the build-up to all that, is continually being asked what you're voting. And I'm like, I live here. They're not polling every single Scot in the world. We're in caves in Lanzarote and all over America. You're not going to ask everybody who doesn't, like Sean Connery, like he's been in the bloody Bahamas for decades. He doesn't give a shit. And then afterwards, people have the right to then say to me, you lost. So it's a terribly frustrating year or so in London.
Yeah, well, I hate when politics becomes like that sort of sports fandom, right? Like,
the sort of the the creep of like the confidence, I think, in some of the older white men that I work with as a freelancer around my industry is quite interesting. If I'll say something along the lines of, well, Tony Blair and David Cameron seem to be making all right money for themselves doing their Middle East post-envoy talking head power conference circuit for like 2.3 million, and then one of these guys turned around.
They're literally peace consultants.
Yeah, it's like
ironic.
Was that the Stephen Sondheim quote about satire is dead? This guy just immediately said, "Oh yeah, like Obama." And I was like, I wasn't talking about Obama, but I mean, and then said, "There's no way that he's getting $400,000 unless he set all that up beforehand whilst he was in office." I was like, but why are we talking about this now? Why can't we have a calm conversation?
Yeah, running on, right?
yeah. It's just, but it's so blatant, and there's a lot of I think angry white like mic drop stuff where they just think, oh yeah, this is gonna totally tarnish their conversation argument and just do this thing. And just like, really, that's.
I've seen it, and it comes from the sort of like Twitter sphere of just saying it really succinctly and being like, game over. I've seen it happen all the time. Just like, short point, game over. Left has nothing to say about that. And you're like,
it's basically a lot of whilst it is obviously bringing absolutely everybody together. Most of the stuff is like, most of these venues are not a decent arena to have any sort of conversation in whatsoever. It's a bit, I think the first time that you ever saw that sort of bile was on the YouTube below the line comments about 10 years ago, wasn't it? And now it's basically just every fucking where. Anybody can come in, say some bloody nonsense, and then just peace out, block the thread. I've said my bit, destroyed them, and then just
So it sort of reminds me, to go off on another tangent, but they're just not as good at social media as they think they are, which is why they get so angry. They've been in this little bubble, right? And the similar sort of thing happened in Thailand, I think 6 months ago, where there was this Thai Chinese actor who said something against the Chinese government, and the Chinese netizens all came in and started like social media war. And everyone started like realizing they're not very good at these meme wars. They're like they've been censored, they've been coddled, they've got the Great Firewall of China, and it's a similar thing. Like these boomers, like it's just not very good at the game. Like you haven't won the argument.
I think my favorite moment in all of this regards to BLM in America was the marching in of the K stands from K-pop when they flooded the police servers with videos of themselves dancing in response to the police saying, we want videos of people in these protests doing bad things because we're going to get their faces, do an ID match, go around their house, arrest them, get all these guys. And all these the K-pop, like some sort of weird, adorable transformer, all like got together and just flooded all these police servers to the point where they crashed. It was like a DDoS attack of them dancing. It's just millions of. It literally just said, "Show them what we've got," and it just like this kid's like all dressed up with the spiky hair and like amazing tracksuits, just giving it some for like K-pop videos and stuff. It was amazing. And then the police were like, okay, but we can't do that then. Yeah. our appeal to sort of grassing people up has not gone how we expected.
Because I think it's easy to hate on the American police, but as a white male, I find them lovely. You said you'd been stopped because of the colour, but is it not the case that British police are a lot better than some other countries?
Oh, that was there was another bit of that which I forgot, which was probably the most surreal bit, and it did feel like it was like maybe a nice man really dropping the ball. But whilst he had this like two-handed semi-automatic rifle, he also managed to somehow produce like an A0 or A1 laminated sheet of paper that had a list of all the ethnic origins on it. And I was like, dude, I've applied for jobs. I've seen this before. I'm not on here because it's Scottish, South America and South Africa, and you haven't got a box for that shit on here. And he said,
"Did you actually have the Family Guy colour chart?"
Yeah, that'd be more just like a sort of Dulux thing. What about this? Are you taupe? I was like, yeah, no, probably. And then he then just kind of like double took the thing. He was obviously getting a bit frustrated, and he said, yeah, but if you had to choose, I said, if I had to choose, I'd be fucking Chinese. I mean, if you're going to make this a matter of public record, and you want me just to take a punt, throw a dart at a moving board about which one of these things I am, then sure, but I mean, it's not going to be correct. And he was like, oh, and that's when he wrote down the guy in his African Scottish thing. But at the end of the day, I'm sort of probably desensitized to guns living in London anyway, because there is, on a daily basis, and I work around Westminster and Parliament quite often. There are chaps with big guns. Yeah, they're all over the show, and I don't think that's a good thing that I've got that, but it means when I go to the airport, I don't feel that nervous about it when there's people wandering around with rifles at the airport, because it's not the first and only time that I've ever seen it. And that sort of cowing thing doesn't really have any effect on the likes of me, I suppose. But if you've had a rifle pointed at you with intent, it is like quite a memorable experience. But at the same time, I was in nowhere near the dire straits or immediate perceived threat that anybody who was approached with that line of questioning in America would have. And I can't, the one with the racist white woman on the New York tube, where the black guy took her off, and there was a previous situation where exactly that situation had happened, where basically a white criminal, black member of society doing the right thing in a citizen's arrest got shot by the police on arrival last time. So then basically a whole bunch of the passengers in this carriage, this was quite recently, they all had to get together and just hang around until the cops came, just to say, just by the way, I know what this looks like as far as you're concerned, but it's her.
It's not.
It's and that's sort of great. It's horrendous. That's a sort of reverse mob mentality that is required to peaceably make sure that the correct person is not shot and the correct person is arrested. But if that's happening, and if people are all mindful of that, then crackerjack. I mean, brilliant. I don't have but a lot. It needs to be. It's like the conversation about mental health was already much more prevalent over the last few years than it, and it probably just as well that it's not as stigmatized for people to be able to say during lockdown, I'm really suffering here. This is I don't feel very good about anything, and there's a lot of people reaching out to each other, and it is being reciprocated, and that's really good. And I think I don't know. I guess maybe I just feel quite positive about all of this in spite of the mess. It's going to be messy, but I don't think that it's going to end any worse than it has been.
Are you saying that the British police need less complete revolution and more gentle reform?
There was a march in Glasgow recently, and my dad said what's interesting about all these people all of a sudden, and this speaks to what we've been saying about the momentum and motivation that's been brought up in the UK, whilst observing America. But there was a black man in Scotland was murdered on video 2 years ago by 3 or 4 police. And the video has been observed. The video was released not that long ago, I think, and various people have looked at it and said, well, clearly he was not stamping on anybody as was depicted by the police, which is why they ended up basically assaulting him. And that wasn't really that wasn't a moment in time. That didn't get a spirited response from the people at large to march on the Scottish Parliament and have sort of justice done. It was just a side note. So what has changed? I think it seems like a rise in empathy. So the police in Scotland, for instance, will probably be suffering quite badly about this particular incident. And obviously we've got problems with stuff like Hillsborough, which is a class bigotry, where all those people were tarnished with a brush just to make it nice and easy. They're just pickpockets and scum. And chavs is that whole thing has been formulated to apply a cudgel to a particular type of person who's been set adrift by elitist politics, not somebody who's chosen to have that as their life. I mean, quite a lot of these people, I'm sure, would be absolutely charmed if they managed to read a book, but the fact that they haven't is not their fault. I mean, I don't blame the soldiers in any of this. Is what I wrote in that picture from Waterloo with the black guy carrying the white protester yesterday. It's a startling image, but it's like there's none of the soldiers on either side of this, including the police, are necessarily wrong. It's just a lot of people have a particular sickness, or basically haven't been properly educated, or haven't had the opportunities, and it now manifests itself in some pretty grisly ways sometimes. That's not really anybody's fault, isn't it? They genuinely feel that they're passionate about it. But the interesting thing about the marches yesterday, the bad ones, is that none of them had a placard because they didn't have anything that they wanted to really say. They just went down there for a brawl and to, do all the things like you said, piss on the fucking wrong statue, for God's sake. But they did. None of them had not one placard. They came down there with a set of tinnies at 10 a.m. to brawl. And that...
No, it's not actually quite true, because I did see a photo. They had one banner they'd printed.
All right.
And it said Britain first, but Britain was spelt wrong. So
what
Britain first.
What's Ian got to do with
it? Yeah, leave Ian out of it.
Yeah.
Come on.
Release Ian.
But no, it's a really good point.
All right, I'm glad there was one,
really
though. That's great. Is that? I'll have to look that up. That's fantastic. No, it doesn't feel like... It feels like the passion is coming from one place, right? And the other thing, the reactionary thing, it's not a passion. It's just genuinely... It's an immune system response thing, just to, like, sort of not have a conversation that's any worth. It's just like, well, in that case, I'm going to say the opposite is true and go down there for a brawl. But, yeah, I didn't think there was any heart in it. And the video of them, like, sort of steaming through picnickers in Hyde Park or whatever, it was just bizarre. Like, sort of 3 white picnickers getting... like had at by like a swarm of locusts at a barbecue, basically. Just this mob. It looked like something at The Simpsons. And I'm sure the picnickers didn't think it was anywhere near as endearing as an animated cartoon, but it did not. It was just stunning, and there's many more video evidence of what it was all about yesterday. I think like sort of stuff like Hillsborough or say cover-ups about other affronts to working class people, like say the paedophile network in various Welsh care homes during the 70s. The fact that sort of like there's been a sort of cover up that feels like that, not necessarily this massive conspiracy, say in the House of Commons or that all these judges and whatever were in it, but there has been a conversation which has included, the WikiLeaks, the Snowden papers, the Panama Papers. That was all kind of alluding.
Yeah, just an erosion of trust.
But that's all. That's alluding to. It's a vertical struggle. It's everybody else, and then we're getting fucked by on high. And the most beautiful thing about Brexit was that it all of a sudden turned it into a left-right thing again, and all of us like sort of shouting at each other. Where what it was about to achieve was us just going, wait a minute, are we all being lied to here? And that's what you wanted. What you wanted is like some people who maybe weren't as well informed to all of a sudden get with the program about what the broader picture is. It's like, oh, hang on a minute. So you're Somalian and poor, and I'm white and poor. And that's for slightly different reasons, but the effect is the same. We're both a bit fucked. And then they managed to do this whole bait and switch, show the dog a card trick, and we're all arguing about God knows what, and it's pointless. Yeah,
it's really funny how like race and class intersect it, because often what you get is this, let's not... Like they say with the bait and switch, let's not talk about race. It's not about race. It's about class. You're like, okay, let's address the class thing. Oh no, we can't do that.
That's it's not exactly dinner conversation, is it?
Whoa, that's Marxism. Not that.
There's another thing I thought about the other day. When people say they can't see colour, I saw it in your notes. I was like, if you can't see colour, how on earth can you like sort of sniff out a queer? Like how do these people who apparently purportedly cannot tell that you're from somewhere else or don't want to even talk about it are all of a sudden completely capable of spotting somebody who may be gay in a crowd? You know what I mean? It's unbelievable.
Really good gaydar.
yeah, like it's top gaydar. But I've got chromatic vision, so.
I am actually colourblind, but it makes it harder to tell the difference rather than actually...
Yeah, probably between green and blue, though, right?
Yeah, green and red.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Should we do a
green and red? Well, that's dangerous.
Should we do? That's why he's wearing his hat. He didn't realize how controversial it was.
To hold it up to traffic lights.
This green hat. No one's going to worry about that. Yeah, they won't let me be a bomb diffusal expert.
Should we do a quick fire round of logical fallacies on this topic and see if there's anything we want to pick up?
Yeah. So one I wanted to mention about what you were just saying, Jamie, is this whole idea about like Antifa and then anti-Antifa. The idea that these anti-racist protesters didn't have anything to say.
Yeah.
Right. And then this narrative that gets constructed of like, well, on the one hand, we've got the Antifa, and on the other hand, we've got the fascists or the racists or whatever you want to call them. Let's call them what they are, hooligans or fascists.
Yeah.
And then people go, well, I don't like either extreme, so I'm against both.
Right.
That's in Spain a big argument. I mean, that's not just some random person with a logical, do you know what I mean? That's like the mainstream political discourse in Spain is like, I'm against fascists and I'm against anti-fascists.
Well, that's bystander psychology right there, isn't it? That's just, I don't want to piss anybody off. I'm just going to sit tight until this goes away.
And it's clearly not going away, the house.
But it's not even that. It's almost siding with the status quo.
Oh, sorry,
which,
I see what you mean. Yeah, if you're saying that both have a sort of quantifiably similar level of violence and or tonality that you think that you can somehow tally them up, then yeah, you're right. You're on the wrong. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But I think the anti-Antifa, the racist EDL, right? They do damage on two fronts. One is, actually what they do, but the second is they make it like that's the dichotomy. Like Black Lives Matter aren't fighting against a few football hooligans. It's about structural racism, right? Like even if the police in England are nicer than the police in the US, right? You still have this situation where if you're born a certain color, you're more likely to grow up poor, which makes you more likely to be working in the NHS, more likely to be living in a house with lots of people, which means that when Corona comes, you're more likely to die of that. You're more likely to get stopped and searched by the police. So even, we're not gunning down as many people in the streets, although Jamie's just raised a case that I hadn't heard about, which is telling, the fact that I hadn't even heard about that. But yes, you are more likely to get stopped by the police for looking like someone is often the reason that's given, right? Oh, you look like the suspect we're looking for. Okay. Yeah. Now we search your pockets. Oh, you happen to have drugs on you. Fine, we'll arrest you for that. Oh, you resisted that arrest. So it's these structural things. And I think that what really happens is, as entertaining as it is to watch these stupid thugs embarrass themselves and the heroic BLM protesters look after them and raise that olive branch that they didn't fucking deserve, is that they're stealing auction. And it's not about them. The conversation shouldn't be about them, right? Like there's a whole structural problem that needs to be addressed. And so even the positioning of Antifa versus these guys bothers me. No, it's not about the guys that showed up yesterday, like 2 weeks later, to piss on a statue. No, it's not about them. It's Black Lives Matter are raised, like you say, vertically, right? Like raising a point that the whole system needs to change. And I think not only do these guys do a disservice when they show up, but they steal air from an important conversation about how the systemic change needs to go. It's not a football team, Antifa versus those dickheads. Like, no.
Because that would be binary. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's just we're not about that. Yeah. It's just, it's just so deeply entrenched. It's really hard to unpick. And if this is basically the start of like a serious, like what will be catastrophic rebuilding. I mean, the article, the one from Medium that I sent you, the chap that concludes that this is the end of this era. This is truly the end of this segment. And the problem is that we haven't got a sort of a contingency thing waiting in the wings to roll out for when, all right, well, that's as far as we got with like sort of colonialism and all the legacies therein. And now we're going to bring out this thing and travel to space. There's none of that's ready yet. But
we aren't done pretending it's not a problem.
I think that might be the case.
And asking people, don't
that's it. Because flash forward a year, is it shush? Flash forward in a year. What's is it likely that this conversation will have been muted because everybody just got back to work and got on with it, or is there still going to be a daily comeuppance for, say, bent cops, or like a different, a recession of eviction laws, or stuff that affects people who are going to be utterly wounded by all this sort of stuff? Is there going to be a repairing of the welfare state? Is there going to be? Is the NHS going to remain to be?
Right, like if you look at the Me Too movement, for example, people all thought that would go back to normal. It hasn't.
No.
I saw yesterday on LinkedIn some woman be like, "Oh, this dickhead's like flirting with me on LinkedIn. Tag him, tag his company, 10,000 likes." You're like, "Shit, you can't get away with that shit anymore." You used to be able to, right? We all assumed it'd go back to normal. You can't. At the same point, there is a big push for. Oh, and again, that Carla's book, I recommend that, and the link Jamie just mentioned, links below. But he points out that there's this big perception, and it's not only the right-wing press that pushes this narrative that multicultural London is failing, right? Even the left-wing press has these like victim porn, terrible stories of tragedy and poverty that kind of give people this impression that anyone that reads it, I bet if I asked you, has London crime gone up in the last 10 years? Most people would probably guess yes. When you actually look at the statistics, hasn't at all.
Right.
But yet everyone has this impression from the media that things are getting worse and worse. And the chief of police is pushing this, we need to reintroduce stop and frisk. It's just something we need to do, which we all know will...
Well, yeah, they've done that before, and it ended in a particular note, didn't it? Yeah, and that is interesting. I mean, for my part, I mean, I have been aware of it dropping just because there was in 2008 and 2009 a spate of black and black gun violence in Tottenham and Peckham, and other boroughs like sort of linked to each one. There was a lot going on with young gangs for a bit. And then, bizarrely, it was when the recession kicked in, a lot of that stuff went quiet, and it never really got back up to the peak that it was rolling at, because it was properly regular for quite a while during, I think, 2008, until everything kind of slowed down. And I wouldn't have been that surprised, but like you say, the general noise, and again, like the same thing that sort of maybe purports that there's a lot more of people with far right extremist views taken to the street than there actually was. The press probably just likes to keep everybody on their toes to make it look like there's a dueling gang warfare on the streets of London every night.
Well, I lived in London for a couple of years, and when I lived outside of London, I used to think it was just a non-ending race war. When you live there, you're like, that's quite nice there. People are all right.
Oh, was it Birmingham or London that Trump said was like a walled off, like
Birmingham, wasn't it? He said there's like no go zones.
Yeah.
And everyone was like,
there's this American right wing.
Where have they built this?
Narrative that Muslims have made parts of Birmingham and London no-go war zones. I'm like, and I know, like Bethnal Green Road, like all these places where the ISIS brides came from. They're just nice.
Yeah.
Communities.
Yeah.
Like they are like
the rent says otherwise.
Crowning jewel of an example of multiculturalism working. It's fine, right?
Yeah. It's they're like sort of, it's £1,000 a room down there. You know what I mean? It's not. Funny enough, like I mean, in America, I think quite a lot of the ISIS were recruited in Minneapolis as well. So they've had a sort of historic, which is probably quite felt by people in that area. There has been like a sort of like feeling of being let down or like sort of deceived, I suppose, of the fact that these people were like sort of in our midst.
Look across the board, right? Like the people that join terrorist organizations are people that have no other options. Right?
Yeah.
Like if you're the fourth son of a poor Pakistani family,
or you're just pathologically inclined to, I mean, conspiracy theorism helps. There'd be all sorts of reasons why you would be chosen to do this sort of particular legendary work. If you could like convince yourself that you're some sort of hero, then that's half the battle done for your recruiters. And I think a lot of it will come down to like mental damage, like sort of people who require to be special for whatever reason, not necessarily just because they think that they're going to get like some sort of romantic payout for their friends and family if they go and do this horrendous thing. But yeah.
What about people who say like it's all in the past? What about that?
That came up the other day, didn't it, with the chap that I was arguing with recently, where he was speaking of violence and how inappropriate it was. And I said, well, yeah, I guess you're going to have to factor in the last 200 or 300 years of violence. And at which point he immediately said, you can't expect me to take the blame for everything that my ancestors did. I was like, no, but we all have to deal with it.
No,
we don't.
We have to be clear about what happened,
right?
Yeah,
and what it led to today.
Yeah, it's like in fact, the denial is essentially quite aggressive. It's like basically, well, let's not get into all that. And another guy sort of said that he reckons come VE Day, my man's going to be all over that stuff about like sort of what his ancestors did or did not do,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it is a sort of cake and eat it scenario, but I guess that's just the nature of the whataboutery that's going on just now.
And often this, when it just gets simplified into, the left want everyone to apologise for slavery, and you're like, well, no,
not really.
But I bet I could straw man. I bet I could find an idiot who was saying something outrageous and stupid on either side of any debate, right? Which is often what it gets done. Like, the thing of, the left wants you to stay at home and not go outside because of COVID. This sort of the right-wing libertarian, we should open up because it's hurting our economy and this is all a conspiracy theory. And so it just becomes, when it's flattened on one line, right? The left wanted everyone to stay at home until Black Lives Matter, and now protesting suddenly fine again. You're like, yeah, if you're going to oversimplify 14 opinions into, all right, I guess that's a good tweet, whatever.
What else we got?
I mean, where do we draw the line with statues? So talking about the history, right? From the far.
Yeah, what's the point of statues?
Too far? Like,
what's the point of them? Do you know what I mean? To remember what, like, do you know what I mean?
It's normally
why do people care so much about a statue? People care more about a statue than a person.
I think
actual person.
If you go traveling, you would possibly be drawn to stuff. I mean, this is just me, but I think I'm relatively disinterested in a lot of the stuff that I walk past every day here. I mean, I love that. In fact, no, I did think about this the other day because I work in quite a lot of livery halls around London, and there's like about 40 of these things that are like, they all got burnt down in 1666, and so the eldest one now is 1667. I think it's the Apothecaries Hall, and these places are a door on a street in Threadneedle around Bank or something. You wouldn't know that if you go in here. There's like a gargantuan oak-panelled, stainless glass, like there's a courtyard with a fountain and cupids and all this sort of stuff, and there's like bizarre old antiques and everything in it. That is an aspect of history which absolutely deserves to be preserved. They are always run by unendingly decent beadles, as they're called, who have come from a military background in the British Armed Forces, and then I've somehow managed to set up with what I regard as a pretty cosy number if you're like sort of in your like 50s and 60s, just to sit and hang around here and watch the conferences roll in. All that sort of stuff, which I guarantee not very many people in London knew about, let alone our people who came down for a fight yesterday, would be even aware of it. But that is exactly, these are documents to a time in Britain's development as a commercial enterprise, which is really fascinating and interesting. They don't need to have busts of Margaret Thatcher in all of these places to make it any more or less interesting. They don't need to have the duality accentuating one aspect of the fact that somebody was also a philanthropist as well as that other stuff to make it valid and make it like a history worth learning.
Pull all statues down then.
I know. Thankfully, because I've like, got like sort of links in Bristol anyway. I did actually know who Colston was beforehand, and also was aware of the fact that the locals have been having a conversation at length about the Colston Music Hall, which is at this point presumably having the signage taken down and something else, like Bristol Music Hall will probably
change the name, or the building
will
get burned down.
They're going to change it this year.
Are they? But the thing that I thought would be appropriate at that point is to at least have a plaque saying, on this day we changed this to blah because blah. But another friend of mine argued that he reckoned that you'd be essentially enshrining like these. So if you removed Colston completely, then and put a plaque saying here used to be this, then it'd still be fetishized by far right to like basically turn themselves into the Confederates at this point. You're kind of like, well, we're now being victimized. We're now having our history removed, and
but they can do that anyway. They can do that anyway. Well,
I don't have a problem with just going to the.
Seem to be distracting from the important point. Like that's all history, and I'm fine, tear it down, like whatever. But I think the discussion sometimes becomes too much about. Like I say, I know why the extreme right and the extreme left want to argue on that point, but for most people, wouldn't taking steps to reform the police be more important, or is that a false dichotomy?
No, absolutely, you're absolutely right. I mean, just stick all the statues in a museum, or don't. But yeah, any decently run universe and healthy society, we would be fine having quite dark reminders of a murky past everywhere, as long as we were all right, Jack. But we're just not. So this stuff maybe has to be dealt with in a certain way now, because we don't live in Star Trek, and everybody's just wandering around going, "Oh God, yeah, that was awful. Those times. Remember those?" Yes, I do remember those, but because I've studied it from afar, several hundred years in the future of our amazing paradise. But because it's still rocky right now. Maybe this stuff has to be dealt with in a harsher sort of way now, because it will be seen to repair some wounds that are clearly, quite urgently needing required, like seeing to, and maybe just getting rid of everything and chuck it in a museum is far too harsh. And like you say, what's it going to be like? For instance, like Enid Blyton, she's one of my favourite go-tos. She's provided a lot of fun and games and entertainment for a lot of young readers over the world over for generations, and she is as big as they come. So what are you going to do about if there's a statue of Enid Blyton anywhere? I suppose, is that supposed to come down? I mean, perhaps.
But then, yeah, like you say, you can't have a statue of anyone over 200 years old because who from the 1700s would pass our moral test these days?
This is my point, though. This is my point. Like, what's the point of a statue? It's to remind us about the past. We can put it in a museum, like you say, Jamie. How about we put them all in the British Museum, and then all the stuff that the British stole from the whole world, we can give that back to them?
Yeah, because it would have to be a like-for-like floor square footage swap out.
There's
like quite a lot
in the British Museum than there are statues in Britain.
They'll have to get rid of a sphinx or two.
I mean, there's maybe we don't have time to get into this whole discussion about reparations and stuff. It's a fascinating one. I'm really interested in it. But at the very least, even if you reject the whole reparations argument, right, and you say, well, okay, for whatever reason, we're not going to do it. At the very least, the British Museum, right?
Yeah.
We've literally, Britain literally went round the world, robbed everyone blind, everyone, and then put them on display. It's like, imagine if I went round your house and like blatantly stole something. You know it was me. You've got evidence. Right. And then I'm displaying it. And you're like, I'm just going to ask him for it back, I'm sure.
He must have been a mistake.
It's an open and closed case.
My best.
Can I have it back? No, I'm still looking at it. And there's quite a lot of people who want to see it as well. So, stand behind the line, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
The best comeback I've ever had for reparations, right? Someone was like, oh, but that's so long ago. How far back do you have to go? And I'm like,
to the Vikings.
We were still paying slave owners the interest on the money we gave to them, right? You know this, that when slavery ended, then slavery was abolished in some countries, in order to make it tenable, all the people in power had slaves, and so we gave them a massive payout.
Yeah.
Which, to do that, we had to borrow money to do it. And we were still paying off the interest on those loans with our taxes up until, I think, 2018, was it?
Really?
Yes. Yeah, you, Jamie, with your taxes, have paid slave owners' debts.
That explains a lot to do with my tax bills. I was wondering why it's been so fraught.
It's like, well, if it seems ridiculous, like I was we were still paying the slavers up until recently.
Well, I think a lot of Scottish lairds did very well out of that, because it was something like, at the time, wasn't it something ridiculous like, I want to say like £900. I don't know if it was, but there's some sort of like tax offset for every slave freed, which was a huge benefit to. And the stonework in Edinburgh and Bristol is not dissimilar, because I think the same people have been building the same things, and there's all these names from Scotland now which are all of a sudden like Dundas. I didn't realise there's like a Dundas Street, I'm sure, near where my mum and dad stay, and I didn't realise. In fact, I think somebody around there named their house Dundas, which may or may not say a lot about those people and what they live in. But a lot of this stuff is it's so discreet, isn't it? And you've got that's really interesting. I didn't realize that you could that you could provably say that quite a lot of the economic situation we're in now is still literally based on.
Yeah. No, and the buildings and the streets were literally built from that trade, right? Like you see Bristol, beautiful, and it's from the shipping industry. And
technically, that's correct. Yeah.
Like, what was Bristol manufacturing and exporting? Oh, no, nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, but can we leave Winston Churchill statues alone, please? Like, can we draw a line somewhere?
Oh man, did you see that guy cleaning the statue? You see that Tory photo op?
Yeah, and then I saw this, but I'm not sure here. I saw someone calling it out because there was a picture of a black guy cleaning it, and then it was the four Conservatives. And someone said it could have been that paint is notoriously difficult to get off the statue. It could have been that the photo was taken before he wasn't able to clean it or didn't finish cleaning it.
Can someone not even clean a statue out of conspiracy theory?
their point was you can't prove that was the guy cleaning it just from those photos. It does look suspicious. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But then they made me think, and I went, they got me on that one.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's definitely out of order. And then I was like, actually, it doesn't necessarily mean. I mean, I'm just saying it might not be true.
Yeah,
it
fair.
Could be true. Though. It could be
terribly parochially British to you, us arguing about statues.
This is.
Yeah.
This is.
Are we missing the point?
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that might be quite handy.
bit.
It's like Dominic Cummings going for his little jaunt, and now they've managed to sort of leverage everybody's opinions of that into essentially us hoisting ourselves by our own petard when we want to like sort of break, quarantine legislation, because essentially they've gotten everybody so riled up that they're all off down to Brighton Beach the second it's but
I've heard that like these Labour supporters are like, oh, if Dominic Cummings can do it, I'm going to break quarantine. Like, that's not an argument. Like, if you're going to break quarantine, fine, but don't say you're doing it because you're with Cummings.
Exactly.
I copy Cummings. Whatever he does, I'm with him. Yeah.
What would D do?
What would DC do? Yeah. Jesus. I don't know. Like, even Gandhi, they even want to tear down some of Gandhi's statues.
I heard that. Yeah.
Who's they though? Like, who's they want to? Like, is it everyone?
What's that? Well, this is the point,
exactly
right? Like, some idiot on the left said
Did someone just say it? Yeah.
And it becomes a huge news story because people on the right are just looking for any wrong thing someone said on Twitter. That's the problem as well, is that a news story is now someone on Twitter said.
Yeah.
You're like, that's not news. Like, someone on Twitter saying a stupid thing is not something that a journalist should be reporting. Oh, look at what we found. That's not news. Nonsense.
I think that has been the mainstay of tabloid journalism for quite a while.
Say, reserved for the comments section. No one gives
That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah. Below the line commenter hashtag Damo126.
People are saying, the left are saying, you're like, what? It's not news.
I mean, I suppose it's as valid a straw poll as anything else, isn't it? He just like sort of trolls through.
Why do they want to take down Gandhi? What's he done? What did he do?
Well, he wasn't particularly woke about what he said about how the Indians should be treated better than the blacks in South Africa. So there's some unwoke comments he said.
Right.
But again, I think it's intentionally been made a nonsense point. I haven't seen crowds of people tearing down Gandhi statues, right? Like someone on Twitter said maybe Gandhi too. And
yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
That false equivalence.
Do you think also people really want to take down Churchill's statue? Because all it takes is one person to spray racist.
He's not popular. There is this story.
No, he's not.
It's wrong, I think. I think it's bad history. But some on the left say that, Churchill was as bad, right? Look at how many people he killed in India. Now, if you actually look into the nuance and detail of it, Churchill didn't commit a Holocaust in India, right? Like, he just didn't. Like, there was starvation exacerbated by World War II. He could have done more, but it's also quite hard to ship food. I mean, just look at a map, right? How would Britain or America get food to India when you've got Germany and Japan in the middle of those two?
Well, plus also in that era, like the empathic equivalent to what we have now, being globally aware of a lot of other people's suffering, like so he's kind of just got to deal with what's in front of him at that moment. I would imagine doing something, what is technically over and above and beyond, if you're saying about like sort of shipping a whole bunch of support over there. It would not necessarily like sort of scan with what he was doing at the time. So yeah, I see what you mean. It could be easily used to like sort of make a meal out of like his racial proclivities, or like to make it.
Sure.
There's a load of other stuff he did though. Like,
and if you look at the list of quotes from Churchill, he's not going to win a woke award.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was one of the first people to do the carpet bombing of an unarmed people was in Bosnia, wasn't it? Like, just to try it out. So I think so. That's one of the worst ones that I heard about.
You should do a test, right? You should make a little game, and it's like, who said it?
Yeah,
Hitler or Churchill.
But
just have all of these obscene statements and see if people can guess.
But this is the absurd false equivalence of the left. He wasn't as bad as Hitler. No. I'll fight anyone that says he was.
Yeah.
So yeah, should us? I mean, his thing was already boarded up when they all got there. Their job was already like done. Really, the last thing that I saw, my housemate showed me a picture of there's two cops in front of the statue with ACAB written on the statue, and that's the last thing that was terrorised on Churchill's personage. But he's actually buried in the House of Commons. There's a plaque on the floor when you walk in. He's in the floor there. So if anybody wants to go the full Monty and get sort of desecration of that Hitler-esque erstwhile leader, then that'd be the way to go. Never mind the statue. Get the real deal. I'm not advocating exhuming anybody. I just...
Yeah,
please not.
It's very controversial, exhumations. They've been doing the same in Spain with Franco. He was glorified and buried in this like huge hall, Palace of the Fallen or something like that, the Valley of the Fallen. And the left-wing government have just exhumed his remains. There was an outcry about that.
Right.
Crikey. But don't you think, I was going to make an analogy here with veganism, all these kind of small little details that people pick apart. It seems like this is a very similar thing. People are picking apart like minor details of Black Lives Matter, but the point is like, can we get rid of racism? That's the main point, right? Yeah. And with veganism, it's like, can we just not eat animals? Can we not exploit them anymore?
You can find a straw man saying something wrong and take that argument to extreme, and then at the end be like, therefore, I don't have to listen to any of this.
Yeah, and it's like, actually, I think eating honey is ethical, so therefore I can ignore all the suffering.
Well, like, you end up being like, sorry, why are we talking about a Gandhi statue? Who was the face?
Yeah, what?
You've just made up
about ending racism, not about statues.
Can we address the black people that keep dying? I think before we talk about Gandhi statues that might be tampered with in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a pretty good derailment. But I think, like we've been saying, it will only be derailed for so long before it gets right back on track, because it does seem to be here to go the distance, really, to maul several analogies. I just don't think it's going away, and it's because it is so all-encompassing. Quite a fraught struggle to get a lot of different tenuously linked societies in order before we start dealing with other stuff like a 1 degree centigrade increase in global temperature that's going to have to require a lot of hands-on and a lot of people cooperating to get down to any sort of livable level. If that starts occurring within the next, they said like 18 years or something, that runaway effect is much more possible once it gets to that. And that means that everybody needs to be having an adult conversation about taking care of being custodians of our planet. And that means, obviously starting with exactly what this conversation is now. The next thing is going to have to be, by virtue of like order of importance at the moment, environment. And we will not be able to do any of the latter without making serious progress on the former, because we can't have it's pathetic that we've managed to let the planet get into the condition that we have from, obviously like an awful lot of eating of meat and just desolating, like sort of Brazil's a case in point, isn't it? That guy doesn't really give and his predecessor didn't really give a monkeys about the Amazon. They're just trashing
They care about the money it makes them.
Yeah. I feel sort of feel quite sorry for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, because they seem to have an awful lot of really useful stuff there for our fucking iPads. And, like Fever Tree tonics, quinine comes from there, and there's just everybody wanders in there and says, what a rich and amazing resource this place is. I think Tony Blair said it was a gold mine of a country. With all the...
that's the sort of racism that matters, right? Looking at a country and being like, that's us.
Like it's risk, basically, yes. That one's quite useful, by the way. If you're ever playing, like, Get to the World, then that one's quite good, because it's got all the stuff that you need to sell iPhones. So hang on to that for as long as you can.
And that's it. Like, people say, but, colonialism's over and the British Empire died, but the thinking behind it...
There was a Jack Daniels advert. Yeah, exactly. It's never going to... There was a Jack Daniels advert like a couple of years ago in the tube around Christmas time, when their hokey bullshit PR campaign really revs up its gears around Christmas and sort of make sure that everybody gets absolutely plastered but drinks responsibly. And they had this actual bit where I could not fucking believe that he basically described that Jack Daniels got the recipe of what sounded like a slave at the end of the garden called Nearest Green. And but the way the thing was written was there was a black man friend of the family lived at the bottom of the garden. I was like, lived at the bottom of the garden.
He wasn't a Poddington P, was he?
No, and it was because with the name Nearest Green, I was like, so first off, there's a black man somehow now all of a sudden embroiled in Jack Daniel's history who had the original recipe for how to make this stuff, and they've not only misjudged that is something they should probably keep to themselves. They've chucked it out at Christmas, and
a heartwarming tale.
Yes, but that's the sort of level of, it's like that Pepsi advert. That's a level of like sort of tone deafness that's required to think that this is going to be quite a good get for a festive advert. Is to basically trumpet our links to slavery. And there was a lot of research done on it. Apparently, that's more or less what it was. It was a friend of the family. But it's I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm slightly distracted by some drumming outside.
Should we end on an inspiring quote? Seems a good point, Zenny, to wrap up.
Who's got one? Oh, not me. Oh,
Marijn, you've been quiet. You want to inspire us?
What quotey?
I don't have a quote prepared. Sorry.
There's that. Well, there's a one that applies to the individual, but it's every good man has a past and every bad man has a future. And if that's basically, could be like sort of extrapolated to us as a whole, it's like, yeah, it's been messy. It's been inarguably bad. But I don't think that people are necessarily, as I regret saying to my colleague online the other day that I thought that he was irretrievably racist, because there's a chance that a lot of people are not irretrievably racist. There's a chance that we can change them.
As we've said with a few of these discussions, even if you can't always persuade the person you're talking to, there's always the bystanders, right?
Yeah.
And just more and more people are noticing that conversation, like those arguments are getting lost more and more because, as I say, they're not very good at forming a coherent, persuasive argument. They persuade themselves, they persuade their echo chamber, mic drop, game over, we win left. But it's like, no, like, go, you haven't engaged with any of these points. Like, you're talking about Gandhi statues and that one time Liam Neeson, they were a bit mean to him, and that, you know, like the example of the CEO of Netflix who got fired because he used the N-word, but he was using it appropriately because he was saying, well, what words shouldn't we use on our platform, right? Now that's a story. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the left going too far. But you've had to fine-tooth comb decades of stuff to be like, oh, look, a poor director of a Fortune 200 company got fired. Should we address this travesty? Maybe not. Maybe there's bigger priorities right now. Maybe there's bigger injustices, right? Like, if that's the best the right can throw at this. Like, the poor director of Netflix. You're like, oh, really? Is that the priority right now? Fuck. You guys are losing the argument. Everyone knows it. So that leaves me hopeful.
Yeah. As long as they keep on faffing around like that, that's all good. I mean, I genuinely think that we're going places, and it's going to be bumpy, but it's going to get where a lot more of us would have hoped we'd have been maybe 10, 15 years ago. I think it's going to happen. A continuous thread. Like you say, if the Me Too has just refused to just sack it off and, you know, sit quiet in the corner, then, and that obviously dovetails into this current mobilization perfectly well as well. If you take, like, go back to the whole thing of othering, it's exactly the same for women in quite a lot of professional scenarios and in life in general as it is for black people, really, as that John Lennon song once said, with which I shan't quote, but I guess, sorry, I feel like I'm running out of steam. I don't want to keep on.
Jamie, it's brilliant. Like, thank you so much.
That's really nice chatting to all you guys. How often do you do these?
About once a month.
Right. Wow.
So if we can't end with John Lennon's song, have you got a track you want us to play on the outro music?
Oh, yeah, I suppose I could do. Yeah, just like a minute or something. Yeah. Do
you?
Or longer.
Or longer? Yeah, I've got quite a lot of stuff. Yeah, whatever you like. Yeah, that last one was a bit mental, so maybe just something a little bit softer.
I did enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a little...
Just whatever, I think. Like, if fair play, if someone's got through to the end of the podcast, they could be like, "Oh, that music's a bit too mental." Like,
You've already promised me a hat.
listening
I
to
didn't
us,
expect to
really.
get sort of, air exposure as well from my music. But the hat is just, that's fantastic.
Oh, mate, shamelessly self-promote. I have a link to whatever you want as well.
Okay, that's not a bad idea, yeah.
Yeah, sweet.
All right, lads.
No, good chat. Thank you, man. Like,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
Really nice to
all
meet
the
you all.
tangents.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, sorry, I am a
No.
massive wanderer.
Good.
There's
We
far-
all are. We all are.
Yeah, no,
Kind of
but I
the
mean,
point.
clearly you all have like sort of some more academic discipline in all of you than the back behind me would represent for myself. But yeah,
You look like the most intellectual.
yes,
We should have
and
bedrooms,
yeah,
shouldn't
and
we?
yeah. All right, chaps. Well, I guess I'll love you and leave you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
and
it.
if,
Thanks, man. Good to meet you.
Likewise, yeah. And if there's any issues with any of your audio stuff, then I guess just give me a shout because I think I've done all that on the stick as well.
Yeah,
So
and let's meet up for a pint when such
when
things are possible
when that
again.
things happens, yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, man.
Grand.
I'll show you the link once it's up. And
Cool.
all right.
All right, guys. Peace and love.
Yeah, send me a link to your music.
Shall
Send
do.
me a link to anything
Yeah.
you want me to promote, and we'll do all that.
Cool.
All right?
All right, guys. Catch you up.
Thanks
In a
very
wee
much,
bit.
gentlemen.
Bye now.
Take it easy.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Quick settings. Okay, never mind.